Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio with another structure build for the Wild West Boomtown of Calico. There's a structure at Knott's that's very closely associated with Goldie's place, the Calico Jail. And at Knott's, it sits in the alley just back behind Goldie's. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have the room back there to add the jail, but I did have a little bit of room over to the right of Goldie's place. So I figured, what the heck? In for a penny, in for a pound. I built Goldie's place, might as well build the Calico Jail too. The Calico Town Jail is another one of Walter Knott's classic peek-in attractions that dates from the earliest days of Ghost Town. It's still there today, and still features poor old Sad-Eyed Joe, the unlucky prisoner who talks to guests with the help of a performer and a hidden microphone. Now, if you've been to Knott's Berry Farm and you've visited with Sad-Eyed Joe, you'll know that the jail is not brick or stone or even adobe, but it's actually made of wood slabs laid on top of each other and interlocking at the corners in kind of a finger joint. And as it turns out, this was not at all an uncommon form of early jail construction in the Wild West. And so I'm going to do something similar for my version of the Calico Jail, except I will be using railroad ties, 8x8 railroad ties, interlocking at the corners to model my version. The Calico Jail is actually a pretty small structure. My version is only going to be 10 by 10 feet, just big enough for one guy, basically, one prisoner. And I've cut a piece of 1/16 inch thick birch plywood to act as the floor and the foundation. In reality, the floor would probably be dirt, but we're going to fudge a little bit here. Also, I've cut a hole, I drilled a hole, quarter-inch hole in the corner right here to the left of the front door so I can bring wiring up where it won't be seen, because I do want to illuminate the interior with a single yellow flickering LED to simulate lantern light. The first thing I want to build is actually the door frame, because when I do the slab construction all the way around the outside, it's going to butt up against the edge of the door frame. And I'm going to make it out of the same O-scale 8x8 ties that I'm making the rest of the building out of. I've already cut and stained the wood I'll need for the door frame, so just need to glue this together. I like to use my my little cutting mat here to keep things square, but I am going to eyeball it. Don't want it to be too perfect. I'll be adding the door itself a little bit later on. I can go ahead and attach this door frame right now, I think. Looks a little bit like Stonehenge. Now I can put in this little 2-foot long piece here on the corner. And this piece, which is 3.5 feet, gluing it to both the base and the door frame. So this thing's going to be super sturdy and strong when it's all done. Those interlocking joints. And these side pieces are 2 1/8 of an inch long, 2 1/8. Make sure it meets flush at the corners, because we don't want anybody escaping from our jail. And then along the back wall, a full 10-foot long piece. 10 foot long, or 2.5 inches. Now I can start gluing in the second level of ties. This time the full length goes on this side. so that it overlaps this joint, just like a log cabin, just like Lincoln logs. We've got a little teeny piece for this spot right here. Shorter piece here. And another little custom piece right there. There we go. And that is how the whole thing goes together all the way up. Only one door, no windows. It's a jail cell after all. Now I'm fortunate in that these Kepler ties that I'm using are already a scale 10 feet long, so I don't even have to cut those for the longer pieces. But for the shorter ones, I have my little mitering jig set up with a stop, so I can cut these shorter side pieces all to the exact same length. My little Japanese razor saw there. So those come out to a scale 8.5 feet long, and those fit in between the longer 10-foot pieces, just like that. So right now I'm going to cut and stain a whole bunch of these, so I'll have them ready to go. All right, I believe I have all the pieces I need to finish the walls of my jail. So now I'm going to stain them, and this is an India ink and rubbing alcohol stain. It's about 50 to 1, maybe more. Alcohol to India ink, maybe closer to 100 to 1. You got to experiment. I don't have a precise formula that I use, obviously. I just mix it until it looks right. Usually it comes out too dark at first, and then you just keep adding isopropyl alcohol, 70%, until it gets to the right color, the right shade that you want. Just drop these in here. Only leave them in for a second. They don't need to be in there a long time, unless you want them to get really dark. Just drop those in and pull them right back out again. Then set them aside to dry. You see how I'm, I don't know if you can see, you see how I'm separating these? Make sure they're not stuck together when they come out of the stain. That way you don't get any weird looking dark blotches. Well, I finished the walls, and just I'm using my sanding block now just to flatten the top, make it nice and flat and square for the roof, which is going to go on next. I'm going to build a removable roof, and I'm using some 1/8-inch thick basswood to create these roof trusses. Looking at the photo I have here of the Calico Jail, it looks like they're just slabs of wood that have been carved to create these these roof trusses like this. I've already laid out and cut out one of these, and now I'm going to cut out the second one. And to cut thick basswood like this, here's how I like to do it. I'm just going to take my utility knife, and very carefully, you don't want to go in and try and cut it all at once. Just easily kind of work your way in. And once I get it about halfway through, then I want to come back with a fine-tooth razor saw and finish that cut. Make sure it's nice and square. There we go. Also a good idea whenever you're cutting something like this, that you want the waste piece to be out on this side of the straight edge. That way, if you make a mistake, if the blade moves, it goes into the waste piece and not the piece you want to use. There we go, nice and easy. So one of these will go here, and the other one will go on the back like that. I love that the peak of the roof is off center. On the prototype, it's just left of the door, so that's the way I did mine too. For the connecting beams between the roof trusses, I'm going to use some O-scale 6x12. I also want a center ridge pole, a ridge beam, right here. I'm also going to make that out of 6x12, and I need to notch these roof trusses. I've made a little pencil mark there so I can cut this piece out very carefully without splitting this, and that's the trick, isn't it? So I'm going to cut this piece out now, and then I'll do it on the same thing on the rear one, and this ridge pole should just drop right down in between those two. That's the theory anyway. All right, those done. Now I just want to add a little notch to the front of this ridge pole, and so you don't whack your head when you're going in the door. Very thoughtful for the prisoners. Now I can start putting this thing together, and I'm going to build the roof right on top of the structure, but without gluing it to the structure. I'm going to build it up here to make sure that everything aligns properly, but it's not going to be glued to the structure itself. Instead, I'm going to use some other pieces of 6x12 that I've cut, and these will be attached to the back of the roof braces here. Now, these pieces will do two things. One, they'll help key the roof into place, but they will also prevent light leaks from the structure around the eaves of the roof. And now I'll just use a sanding block with some 400 grit sandpaper in it to smooth down the top edges of these beams to match the angle of the roof here. And there is our removable roof. That's a pretty nice fit. Now for the roof panels themselves, I'll be using some of this 1/32 of an inch thick birch plywood, which has been laser scribed. Get them in the right way here. And looking at photos of the prototype, I noticed that the roof is actually slab construction as well, with the rafters just lined up one right next to the other in a row all the way over the top from one side to the other. Now to accomplish this look, I'll be using a whole bunch of O-scale 6x6.
but only the ones at the end will be full length, and the ones in between will only be about ½ inch long. So we'll get the same look, but save a whole bunch of lumber. And while waiting for the stain to dry on all that lumber, I went ahead and painted a sign that said jail. I used an old popsicle stick that I'd weathered and distressed, and painted in the letters with some antique white acrylic paint. And then it was time to finish the roof panels. I glued each of the 6x6 pieces in place to replicate the look of slab roof construction. Then I used my sanding block once again to bevel the top edges of the roof so the two sides would meet properly at the peak. And then it was time to shingle the roof. Fortunately, I still had about ½ a sheet of shingles left over from Goldie's place that were already stained just the right color. These are laser-cut cedar and peel and stick, so that really sped things up quite a bit.
Now for the door, I've got some nice scribed 1/16 of an inch thick basswood, which was just some leftover stuff in my scrap box from another kit. And but since it was only 1/16 of an inch thick, I wanted something, thicker. I wanted a thicker door, about 6 inches deep. So I took and cut 2 identical doors and then glued them back to back to create a door that's about 6 scale inches thick. And now I've got some scale 2x6, and I'm going to frame in this window, which will have the bars in it. Now, looking around the studio here for something to make the bars out of, I came across this. And this stuff is heavy-duty, like industrial-grade emery cloth, which is used in plumbing to clean brass fittings before they are soldered together. And it's exactly the right size and shape for the bars in the window. So I cut a little square of that and I painted it dark brown camo, and now I'm going to fit it inside the window frame, and that'll give us our barred window. Stuff is impregnated with silica, so it's already got this great sort of rusty texture to it. Once you paint it with that dark brown paint, it really creates a nice illusion of rusted old metal bars. Just need to trim it down just a hair here. See if I can fit it in here. Ideally, I'd like this to be just a nice press fit. I think I got it. I could have just glued it on the back, but that wouldn't look quite right. It should be about halfway through, right in the middle of the thickness of the door. And since it's cloth, it has a little bit of flexibility to it. So there's the bars in the door. Well, now I can install the door in the opening, and I'm afraid Sad-Eyed Joe is never going to get out because I'm gluing the door shut. This wants to be, unlike most exterior doors, this one opens outward, so it should be flush with the door frame on the outside. For the long iron bar hinges, I've actually got this is some Grant Line narrow gauge boxcar hardware that I had in my scrap box. And these are like the straps that go around the corners on boxcars, but they're also perfect for this kind of serendipitous. You gotta be ready for these things to happen. So that's just perfect. So I'll glue those on with a little CA, I think. the other half of the hinge, I have another little piece of, tiny little piece, where'd it go? Oh, of boxcar hardware that I will use to create the look of the other side of the hinge. I think I'll turn these horizontal like that. Yeah. It's quick before it sticks to my fingers. There we go. Now I just need to figure out some sort of latching mechanism. Well, I couldn't really find anything that worked in my scrap box, so I ended up fabricating a latch and bar out of some 25 thou laser board that I had. Pretty pleased with the way that turned out. I'll get a little weathering on that. Now there's one more little detail I want to add to the exterior. Last detail, a little laser cut horseshoe here to the right of the door. Got a couple of drops of CA on the back. Doesn't look like Sad Eye Joe's luck is going to change. Not with that horseshoe upside down. Anyone familiar with the practice of the horseshoe knows that if you down upside down like that, means all the luck runs out. You got to have it turn the other way to hold the luck inside. So it's a bad luck horseshoe. Now it's time to add some light to the interior. I've got a little 3mm yellow flickering LED. And this is a piece of foam tape. Also put some just regular Scotch tape over the top, over the sticky part, so it doesn't collect dust and stuff. Take the backing off. And stick that to the wall. There we go. I also notice I put some illustration board in here. This is just to block light leaks in the corners. Just a couple of pieces of illustration board. Make sure that the only place that light is coming out of on this is through the bars in the door. That's the only place I want to see it. Speaking of seeing it, let's see if it works. Well, it's just about done and ready to install on the layout, but it just wouldn't feel right to have the Calico Jail without its #1 resident, Sad Eye Joe. So I went ahead and painted up a little O-scale figure to look like Joe, and created a bunk for him to sit on. Nasty looking jailhouse bunk. And, 99% of people won't know that he's actually in there, but I'll feel better knowing that Sad Eye Joe is in jail where he belongs.
I made a hat for Joe from a disc of Bristol board and then painted him with acrylics. I built his jailhouse cot from some scrap laser board and scale 2x4s, then added a ratty old mattress made from painted foam core.
Prop this up here so I can work on it. Pop the lid off. Let's see. Bunk should be right about there. Up against the back wall. Move it all the way over to that end. Yeah. It should look like there's something in there, you know. Gonna use a little Eileen's on Joe's backside here. In you go, Joe. You ain't getting out anytime soon. Just want to do a little bit of weathering here with some chalks. So have sort of a rust color with some orange and some terracotta. Just add a little rust to these iron fittings. So a little bit on the old horseshoe also. Kind of a warm gray. I think that's about all that needs. Okay, I got the wires hooked up. Now I can turn it on, see how the lights look. One final detail, short section of boardwalk out front to tie it in with the other structures in the rest of town. And that's going to do it for this one, folks. Thank you so much for watching that entire video, and I hope you'll tune in again next time for more builds and projects from Thunder Mesa Studio. Until then, keep moving forward. Adios for now.